Hello, I'm Adam and I work for Growing Better Connections with my colleagues Holly and Louise. Growing Better Connections is a practical and far-sighted response to some of the many challenges which are facing us. A 3-year project that started in March 2020, aiming to help people to explore and regenerate the natural world on their doorstep. We offer opportunities for people and nature to thrive through practical solutions like tree planting, training in crafts and habitat management. We want to work with you to celebrate our area and its heritage and feel good by getting outside, staying fit and feeling useful. So what is a community woodland? Well, it's whatever you dare dream it could be, and it will mean many different things to each member of your community. Essentially, they are any woodland where the local community has a degree of control in its management, generally through lease or purchase. They are all slightly different depending on the aims and circumstances of the community, the age and species of the trees, and the wildlife that calls them home. Some common themes tend to run through community woodland groups, like providing opportunities for employment, education, recreation, and of course well-being, as well as the materials, resources, and rich habitats that we all need for life. These themes and the way to achieve them will be explored by our speakers through the examples that they will describe in this video. To provide a little context, in France there are 11,000 forest communes owning over 3 million hectares of land. They grant concessions to local people to gather firewood, harvest timber, produce food and other uses. They contribute to a tree cover that is 5 times greater than that in the UK and a forest economy that is 6 times larger. In Germany, rural communities have had forests for centuries and their ownership is enshrined in forest protection laws. In Scotland, Woodland Woods was one of the first community woodlands in Britain. In 1987, 55 acres were bought for and by the community, assisted by local sculptor Tim Stead, who made and sold a wooden axe head every day for a year to raise funds. It's open to all comers who are encouraged to walk around, to listen to the bird chorus, to visit the wildlife ponds, or picnic at their log cabin. They hold events on the last Sunday of every month and host training courses. This simple beginning has led to establishing business incubators for furniture makers and craftspeople. It's established local timber supply chains and supported further community land purchases. Activities which by now have provided training and inspiration to thousands of woodland managers, artists and artisans. It has also led to the establishment of forest crofts, affordable living and working spaces with land available to members of the local community who recognise that opportunities sometimes come dressed in overalls and look like work. There are now at least 650 community woodland groups in the UK, of which more than 300 are in England, 200 in Scotland, and 150 in Wales. Let's see if we can all work together to add to that number here in North Pembrokeshire. We hope that this video will resonate with your own ideas and aims for local woodlands, and that will germinate as you hear about the inspiring projects presented here. It will highlight some of the resources and practical steps required and the sources of funding available to give wings to your ideas. Growing Better Connections can help to support the growth of those ideas and the formation of new groups to take forward the ideal of linking communities and landscape. The diversity of our communities and woodlands can offer fertile ground for opportunities to benefit people and nature, strengthening the resilience of both in a rapidly changing world. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our three speakers. Jamie Miller, who is the chair of the trustees at Longwood Community Woodland and runs a successful roundwood timber framing company. He will be sharing the story of Longwood's 17-year journey and the changing roles of a community woodland, highlighting a few of their recreational, educational and social enterprise activities. Chris Blake is the coordinator of the pioneering and inspiring Skyline project, and he will be exploring how landscape-scale land stewardship can help communities become economically and environmentally sustainable. Elizabeth Mutch from Llais Goedwig believes that enabling communities to use their local woodlands is more important than ever. With interest in outdoor spaces and planting trees becoming ever more popular in Wales, she's hoping that the new funding for community woodlands will see more people managing and getting into their local woods, and wants to support them in doing so.
So my name is Jamie Miller. I'm the current chair of Longwood Community Woodland. The woodland formed in 2003, and it was basically formed by the local residents that lived on the outskirts of the woodland. So the woodland is 326 acres. It was Forestry Commission, and it was deemed as an uneconomical woodland. So there's a few kind of sloping parts on it. There's mixed broadleaf, and it had been an area of pause, so it was an ancient woodland site. And really the core group wanted to take control because they saw this natural resource on their doorstep. It wasn't being utilised other than members of the public were using it for social activities, walking through the woods, horse riding, cycling, things like this. So they formed this, the group in partnership with the Forestry Commission at the time, which was a very difficult partnership to begin with. A lot of paperwork in terms of who would have managerial control, who would have the profits, and it really didn't work so much in the favour of community woodland. But this was early days, this is early 2000s. So it was before really community woodlands really took off in a lot of ways. Through that process though, they went for, I think it was after about 6-7 years of sort of working in partnership with the Forestry Commission. We had a lot of schemes in the woodland, which was great. There was a forest school, sort of coppicing, investment in sort of in a mill and sort of producing timber and firewood, and lots of conservation work that was going through, which was fantastic stuff. But they really felt like they wanted to take control of that. So we applied in 2011 for lottery funding, and we got one of the biggest lottery grants I think that's ever been given out for a community project. It was over £850,000 with which to purchase the woodland and to provide employment and staff and training for people to maintain and manage the woodland. Since then, it has been a struggle at times, because we've had a lot of changing influences within the woodlands. So we've obviously got climate change, social change, pandemics, lots of things that have been quite a challenge to sort of to keep our head above the water. And it's such a large area as well. 326 acres is a big amount of woodland to get involved with, but the benefits have been astounding, really, in terms of people's involvement, natural resources being used for local people, local economics, the conservation that we've introduced within the woodland, coppicing schemes and natural regeneration, tree planting. All of these schemes have come about through a lot of hard work by the various directors that have been involved in Longwood over the last nearly 20 years. And also, I think one of the key things is the membership. So as a community woodland, any local member, any local person can become a member of Longwood and have their say. And we have regular monthly meetings whereby we discuss and go through different options for the woodland. This is one of the more challenging aspects, I think, and it's one of the things I really enjoy about the woodland is is the differing opinions of how a woodland should actually be managed and maintained. So we've got a really good mix of people, all the way from there should be no human activity at all to, you know, let's start doing, you know, festivals and wood fairs and things like this in the woodland. And it's a fine balance to get all these people to work together. And sometimes they don't. There's been falling outs. I think any community group will have that as they're obviously in the early stages of formation or working through with new members coming in. But I think one of the key things is that whoever is involved, whoever's speaking, is that they are heard. And this, you know, even if they're a far-fetched idea or something that you think is going to be plausible within the woodland, if people feel they've been listened to and they've been part of a debate and discussion, then that process really sort of builds on community, builds on people's relationships with each other, and ultimately sort of benefits the natural woodland that we've got there. Another knock-on effect is that we've got a remit to sort of support local businesses within the wood as well. I mean, with the acreage as well, it means we can do that. So I've got another hat, which is I'm a founder member of a company called T-Pren, and we're a roundwood timber framing company. And we built the visitor centre, which has been at Longwood. That was through lottery funding. And that's a roundwood timber frame, straw bale, clay rendered, timber clad building that is the centre for the woodland. The manager's based in there. It's off grid. We've got composting toilets next to it. And what we're looking at now is to develop the area around that, because 326 acres, but we're actually 4 miles long, so everything's quite spread out, and we've got such a mix of trees in there. But it's really sort of the biggest thing is getting the profile of Longwood raised, because we've still got many people living around us that don't realise that they've got a community woodland on the doorstep. So that's a challenge as well, to sort of spread that word. And the more people that we have involved, the more ideas are generated. So at the moment we've got Stage Goat, which is a local dramatic sort of society. We had a stage that was built in the woods about 10 years ago. It needs repair now, but the time's right where there's funding coming in for the arts. Obviously with the year we've had, everybody sort of is bursting at the seams to go out with sort of arts and crafts and things like this. So we're looking really positively for the future. In terms of the kind of involvement that different age groups as well can have in the woodland. We've got mobile access going into the woodland as well, so walkways for disabled people in wheelchairs, things like that. And supporting local businesses, like I said, through myself. I purchased timber from the woods, and we've got local businesses coming up, doing archery ranges, cycle hire, food. There's a food van that wants to come every sort of weekend, things like that. But these are all based around the woodland that as itself is a natural resource. So from my point of view, from my perspective as T-Pren, is that we are increasing the value and diversification of timber, which is really important, because a lot of it just goes straight to plantation management, which is clear fell, which nobody wants, and can be a bit of an eyesore. And this again is one of the challenges with local communities about explaining to them how trees grow, how it takes time to do these. So, you know, by planting a whip in the ground, you're not going to see a woodland for 10, 12, 15 years. And in that time, you've got to sort of be patient. And we live in a world where we want everything now. And if trees are cut down, they want trees back in. So woodland management becomes more relevant to people the more they get involved and they realise, oh, there's a time frame here for how things to change. And certainly in the last 20 years of being involved with Longwood, you see these different sort of areas grow and develop and blossom into sort of natural wildlife and woodlands. And that's really the connection that we've got with the local people. You know, mental health groups going in, children's groups. It's just pulled everyone together in ways that we couldn't possibly imagine.
I'm Chris Blake, I'm from the Green Valleys, and I'm going to talk to you today about the Skyline project, which is a project I've been working on now for coming up for 3 years, and we're finally getting somewhere, as I'm about to tell you. I've entitled the talk Reimagining the Commons, because what this is about creating common stewardship and common usage of landscape for the 21st century. So taking an old idea and adapting it to the modern days. The Skyline project has been run by the Green Valleys, by myself from the Green Valleys. The feasibility study, which I'm going to talk about, was funded by Friends Provident Foundation, and they've been very, very generous and supportive funders of that process. We've been focusing on 3 areas of the South Wales valleys. We did our feasibility study in 3 different areas, in Treherbert and Ynys and in Cara. I'm mainly going to talk about Treherbert because we've taken that one further. And Treherbert, it's about a change of land use. This is an image that you're all very familiar with. This is actually the Merthyr Butte Colliery that opened in 1855. The Butte part is because the land was owned by the Marquis of Butte. And the Marquis of Butte was given the land or his ancestors, I should say, was given the land 300 years earlier by Edward VI in thanks for presumably some support in a war or whatever it was. And so it was privately owned, and they bought up additional farmland in the early mid-1800s, and the mining really began. But we think about these areas as dominated by mining. Humans have been in that landscape for 3,000 years or more. There are remains of houses there from 3,000 settlements from 3,000 years ago. That industrial period is a very short period. It's 150 years out of thousands of years of human habitation, and yet it dominates our own thinking on things. Pretty much the same view as that photograph, is this view at the top of the Rhondda, the upper Rhondda Valley, looking north across Treherbert and up towards Pen Peak. That's the same spot, and that is as it is today. And they've got a landscape here which is substantially repaired. The coal spoils have been bulldozed and levelled, the trees are growing back, but you've got a community there which is struggling to come to terms with what is 40 years of deindustrialisation. 40 years in which public policy has not done much to compensate for the loss of the industry and the jobs. The inward investment policies, the over spending of EU funding hasn't really changed levels of employment, life expectancy, and some of the other key measures in that area. So we've got a community that's still struggling, even though the landscape around them has changed. You have got industry in these valleys, but it's an industry which doesn't provide jobs. We've got the wind farms, privately owned. There's the Vattenfall, the Pennacomoith wind farm is up on the hills around. It's a 300-400 megawatt wind farm. There is a community fund, but again, it's just grant income coming. There's no jobs there. And there's forestry. There's large-scale forestry there. State-owned forestry, Welsh Government Woodland Estate, managed by NRW. But again, it's not jobs and it's not income that comes into that community. So for the industry that has persisted in that area for a long time, that hasn't really changed. And this is a photograph. This is Treherbert High Street, taken last couple of years ago. And this is Treherbert's a town of 6,000 people. It's the last town before the Ricos and the road over the top over towards Brecon. It's the very end. It's a long way. It's over an hour by train to Cardiff, and I think sometimes psychologically feels even further than that from Cardiff. And it's a town that is struggling. It wasn't just the mines that closed. The Burberry factory closed in the early 2000s. It was a garment factory that at its peak employed 1,500 mainly women at that time, and that has gone. More impacts of globalization on that community. What we were trying to do in the Skyline project was that high street is surrounded, and no, this isn't a Photoshop photograph, that is the actual landscape that is behind the high street, is to reconnect that community with that landscape for economic reasons, for stewardship reasons, for ecology, for carbon capture, for flood prevention, and for social and cultural activities. Can we do that? And we were partly inspired by what I had seen happening in Scotland and the Scottish land reform movement. Now, it's a different history and a different context in Scotland, a lot of private owners, but there are now over 200 projects, 200 community projects in Scotland where the community owns and manages the landscape at a landscape scale. We're talking hundreds of hectares, creating jobs, creating management strategies, and passing that on. And the purpose of the feasibility study was to discover, can we apply that learning and the benefits of that into a Welsh context? We chose the valleys to begin with. It could apply anywhere where there's public land, forestry land, even private land, close to communities. Can we make that reconnection between landscape and community once again? Because it has such an opportunity to make a transformation. So we did, over the course of the feasibility study, we did quite a lot of work. We engaged, it was an idea from outside of the area, and I was planting it into the community. But we employed artists, and very successfully employed artists to the engagement. It wasn't a come to a public meeting in the town hall at 7:15, I'll tell you about it. We started right at the very beginning with involving artists. And in this exercise here, it's about remembering. It's about remembering what has been lost, mapping what has been lost. We also did quite a few activities where we looked at timelines, going right back to the Ice Age and right the way forward, trying to take away some of the importance of the present. If you can see your landscape in a historical perspective, perhaps there's less emphasis on having to preserve what you've got at the moment and more of an openness that the future might be different, which is really what we were trying to do. So we didn't start with, right, how do you want the landscape to be in 100 years' time? It's, well, what was it like? What was it like in your memory? What was good about that? What has been lost? And not just landscape things, community things, the library, the swimming pool, the sense of purpose, the jobs, the employment, the pride of place, although that pride of place still burns just as strongly as it did. So you use the artists to help manage the facilitation in a way which engaged the heart before it engaged the head. And that was one of the most, I didn't know that that's what we were going to do when we started, but now I look back on it, that was probably one of the most important things that we did. So remembering. We also then engaged in revisioning, and that, I suppose, is the part of, well, if we are going to do this, what's it going to look like in the future? How is it? How could it be? If we were the stewards of this landscape, what would we choose to do with it? And this was an interesting question. And I had lots of skeptics coming in and saying, well, you can't let the community know anything about forestry. They're not interested in the forestry. They'll just cut the trees down, maximize the income, and spend it on playgrounds. And that is absolutely not what we found. It was almost as if, and a lot of the community we worked with were either never aware or dimly aware of the Wellbeing Act and its 7 goals, but actually it sort of became an advert for the Wellbeing Act, because the people who live in a place immediately had they wanted to balance nature, jobs, access, community, environment. All of these things were naturally balanced. It wasn't a there is an obligation of the Wellbeing Act and we must follow this through. It was just what they wanted to do. We captured some brilliant comments. One of my favourite comments. It wasn't actually Introvert, it was one of the other communities we're working with. And it was brilliantly sums it up. It said, we want to keep the trees, but we want more round trees and less pointy trees. And in a way, that's pretty much summed up what the ecologists were saying, what everyone else was saying, and putting it all together. And so we did a lot of work with that, a lot of imagining, a lot of things. We worked with the children. We got the children to write poems. We got primary school kids to draw pictures. We got people in their 80s to imagine receiving a postcard, writing a postcard from 100 years in the future, from what their descendants might send back to them now, about what that future might look like, and all of those things. And above all, we were balancing those 3 things. Seemed naturally to be balanced. The economy, just the everyday, going somewhere you can walk your dog, somewhere you can take the school kids after school, and the ecology. And ecology was really important to people. A better home for nature, better carbon capture, better natural flood prevention. All of these things were instinctive and obvious things. And it maybe reflects a little bit on the fact that actually the people who live in a place are the best stewards of it, and not necessarily corporations, whether public or private, who manage an environment for long-term for profit. And it's the people who live in a place will make the compromises that can make that place work. And maybe that's one of the things that we have lost, not just in this situation, but across Wales and the world, where people in a place no longer have a say or the ability to be custodians of that place, and no longer able to make the judgments which make that long-term thinking work. So we published our feasibility study report. The feasibility study set out to answer 4 questions. Do the communities we talk to, are they interested in the idea of custodianship of the landscape? Are there sustainable business models? So are there ways in which you can, otherwise it's just a grant, it's another asset transfer, which is entirely dependent on future grant income. So very key from what we found in Scotland is that the ability to make money sustainably from that landscape is important to the long-term future and viability of the project. And that money can come from forestry, timber harvesting, timber wood processing, can come from energy generation, it can come from horticulture. Although there were also a whole bunch of non-commercial things the community wanted to do: green burial grounds, performing spaces, forest school environments, picnic, tourism buildings, sheds. All of those things wanted to be done. So did they want it? Are there sustainable business models? Can we do those business models and still make it a better home for nature? So can we improve biodiversity as well as that? Not instead of, but as well as. And lastly, how do you govern these structures? What is the governance structure? How does that relate to democratic processes, which are quite interesting? The feasibility study report, it's available online. It answered all those things, and the answers were very positive. Since then we've published that report, things are getting quite interesting. We won a Foundational Economy Challenge Fund grant, effectively to set up a community land trust in the Upper Rhondda to be governed by the residents there, and we're in the process of doing that, so that's happening. We also won some funding through the Lottery's Climate Action Fund, which would give us the research and some capital, hopefully, to actually develop some of the social enterprises which will be able to make this so self-sustaining. So to research and look at harvesting. But this isn't harvesting in the way it's been done at the moment, which is every 40 years bringing in a low-cost contractor from out of area to cut the trees down. This is a local community, training jobs, training people, local people in the skills, and the intention here is to move to a continuous cover forestry model. So you don't cut all of the trees down in one go, but you take out the largest trees on keeping continuous coverage of the landscape. It doesn't maximise your income in the short term. There are arguments that you can maximise your income, but it's more labour intensive. That's not a problem for us because labour is jobs and training and other opportunities. So we've got that Climate Action Fund potential to really take this forward. I think we're at an exciting cusp where we want to get this one up and running and proved. We're talking about between 200 and 400 hectares, 2 to 4 square kilometres of forest, which is in the public estate. It's a change of ownership. It's a recreating that. It's re-establishing it as a common, where everyone, the residents, are all of the commoners who can benefit and contribute to that, to the design of that. I think yes, it'll be great for that valley. The future direction, how it's managed, is entirely up to the community. That's nothing. It's not for me to say for now or in the future. But I think it has the potential to be an interesting experiment. I think it would be the first in Wales of anything like this scale, and it would give an important message about local stewardship, about the commons, and a relocalising of resources and using those in the local environment for local purposes. Thanks very much.
Hello, I'm Liz from Llais Goedwig, and I'm the Development Officer for Mid Wales. And I'm going to talk to you today about Llais Goedwig, about what we do, about how we help community woodland groups, and actually what is a community woodland. So, Llais Goedwig is a membership-led community woodland organisation, and we were established in 2009, so we're just over 10 years old now. We promote, support and we represent community woodland groups across Wales. So we're a national organisation and we were founded by community woodland groups. So we are a grassroots organisation, members-led for our members. So what do you see when you go into a community woodland? Well, you could see volunteers maintaining paths. You could see social enterprises like timber frame buildings. You could see groups engaging with nature, with volunteers. You could see well-being and mindfulness classes, walking in the woods, forest bathing. You could see traditional crafts like green woodworking. You could see events and gatherings, forest schools, or education events. So a whole load of things that go on in a community woodland. So let's really look at what is a community woodland. Well, a community woodland is deeply linked to the local community. What does the community need? Well, it could need dog walking. It could need access to firewood for fuel poverty. An education site, really, really important in these times of COVID. And it could support local livelihoods. It could also just be a place to go and experience the wonderful feelings of being out in nature. And what is a wood for? Well, the wood is for the people and the wood is for wildlife. So most groups are volunteer-led. They occasionally have a project worker. Groups can do sustainable woodland management, observation, engagement. They tend to be less impactful than big, large logging companies, so they can do sensitive, sustainable woodland management. You may sometimes see horse logging, you may sometimes see extraction by hand. What is a community woodland? Well, it's a place where the local community has some degree of control over how the wood is run or managed. Very rarely are the community woodlands owned by the community, but they are usually under some kind of tenure. So that could be an agreement with landowners, with a management lease, with an informal agreement, or with an asset transfer. Being able to take decisions in your woodland is very key to what happens in a community wood. So how many woodlands are there across Wales? 90 full-member community woodlands, and we have 350 associate members. Our current project is called Voice of the Woodlands, which is our name, Llais Goedwig. It's a 3-year Welsh Government-funded community project that is set up to encourage better engagement with the communities from landowners like councils, like NRW, like private landowners. And we're also trying to support and help communities really get the support that they need. So that could be anything from funding advice to skills, to training and to events management. It's not all green and lovely in the woods though. Woodland groups often suffer several problems. It could be difficulty with access to woodlands, security with funding, lack of volunteers, vandalism, arson, antisocial behaviour, and let's not talk about the dog poo. So there are a lot of problems associated with community woodlands, but that's why we're here to help. And that's also why there's 90 other members across Wales who can link in, chip in, offer direct support, offer networking, and offer other resources. So Llais Goedwig, we were set up with 2 simple aims. The first one to promote and represent community woodlands across Wales. And the second one is to provide that assistance, to really help those communities thrive in their local woodlands. And we do that through several things. Networking. We support networking among community woodland groups and other agencies. So we share knowledge, we share experience, and we problem solve. We've also developed sets of resources over the years to really help community woodland groups. That can be all aspects of setting up and managing a community woodland. They're free, they're accessible on our website, and we've also set up a partner project called Goedwig, which is also looking at how community woodlands can access and fund social enterprise within woodlands. And we also raise the profile. Community woodlands are not necessarily well known about in the high lobbies of the Welsh Government or within councils, so we really do promote a wider profile of community woodlands. We try to get the name out there and we try to connect people with what locals are trying to do. And finally, we engage in dialogue with policymakers to bring about a better involvement with the woodlands in Wales. Our role in policy is to make sure that we are the voice of the woodlands and they are truly represented. Now, one of the things that we're looking at the moment is the National Forest for Wales funding. The National Forest for Wales was announced by the First Minister Mark Drakeford way back in March this year. A National Forest for Wales has been mooted for a long time, and Mark Drakeford is firmly behind the idea a National Forest would deliver against a wide range of priorities, which includes a contribution towards maximising the number of trees planted, to reduce the impact of climate change and to support the reverse in decline of biodiversity. But also it's fantastic for communities, getting more people into woods for the positive health effects of well-being, but also to share in the social and economic value of being outside, for example, timber production and small-scale social enterprise. So this fund has been set up by the National Forest of Wales and it's managed by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Llais Goedwig are one of the consultants on this fund, and we have been asked to support any group that's looking at applying for the fund, looking at what it needs to apply, and actually how we can help. So here's some little things about the fund that you may want to know. The Community Woodlands Fund is a capital grant scheme, so it's intended to restore, create and connect and manage woodlands across Wales as part of the National Forest Scheme. Grants are between £10,000 and £250,000, and applications are still open until October next year, with a decision within 8 weeks of applying, which if anyone has applied for National Lottery funding before knows that's an extremely quick turnaround. These projects are firmly rooted within the community. These projects have to show need within the community and they are set up for the community. Llais Goedwig are currently working on 15 applications from community woodlands across Wales, and so far we've had 2 success stories from the first tranche of funding. It's a straightforward, informal project assessment for the first round. The second round is assessed by your own caseworker within the National Lottery, and they work you through to full application. You can apply from anything, for even land acquisition, you can apply for planting, you can apply for woodland management plans, events, training, project officers. It's the most wide-ranging community woodland fund that we have seen in the last 10 years, and I sincerely hope that anyone who wants to speak to us about it will come forward, have an informal chat, and we can certainly try and help you win that money for your community and for your community woodland. I look forward to hearing from you.
So I'm Cara Wilson and I work for Llais Goedwig, which is the Community Woodlands Association in Wales, and I'm the Southwest Support Officer for groups, so running from Pembrokeshire over to Swansea and Neath, Carmarthenshire in the middle. So that's my patch, and I help groups in that patch.
And if someone's interested in creating a community woodland in your patch, can you outline what help you could offer them? Okay.
The best thing to do is to meet a group. So if I can meet and talk to the group and find out what they're interested in, what they've got. Have they got woodland already, or are they planning to buy land and plant it? Are they interested in education or well-being or creating jobs? So it really depends. It's really useful to know what the group is interested in, because we've got a lot of skills in our team covering all those different things, and the network in Wales, the membership in Wales runs so many different types of woods. It might be for biodiversity, like I said, it might be for employment, or getting young people involved and learning things, learning skills. So what I can do is learn from the group and put them together with other members in our network in Wales to learn maybe what they've done elsewhere. They might have 20 years experience in it. I can help, so that's an opportunity to skill share, learn from other people. We've also got access to training, either through our network or with external organisations as well currently. That might not always be there, but there's some great training opportunities for 2021 coming up. We can help with a woodland management plan. We can help with funding. If a group needs to go for funding, I'm really happy to look at the funding application with them, or do a proofread once they've written it, discuss what they should put in it. I can come out and visit. I can join in. So there's a couple of groups that I actually go maybe once a month or so. I'll join in with volunteer days to meet the group and have a really nice chance to chat informally.
We have heard some fascinating examples of the power of community action. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, reclaiming their landscapes and bringing them into community stewardship. The people who live in a place are the best custodians of it. Remembering their heritage and revisioning their future, balancing nature, jobs, community and access to land. Not just access to walk, cycle, sit and watch and listen to the forest, but access to the resources, timber, fuel, food and fibre. Creating places that you want to be in every day to meet the needs of the local community. There are clearly challenges ahead, both in making this happen and in keeping it happening. Organisations such as Llais Goedwig can help to support communities through those processes. As they are led by their members, they can respond to the needs of their members. Their members are also available to share their experiences, insights and knowledge gained along the way. Don't be afraid to ask for as much help as you can. Longwood have faced some highs and lows along their journey and have managed to keep going by ensuring that everyone's voice is heard. Building on the aspirations of the community to pull together towards achieving diverse goals within a common space. Skyline are setting precedents within Wales, releasing public land into public management, progressing economic and social objectives in an area where the scars of heavy industry have been felt deeply. The landscape has already started renewing itself. Through projects like these, the community too can regenerate itself. Engaging the heart before the head has mobilised communities, and social enterprise has been one of the keys to longevity and sustainability within these projects. Llais Goedwig's Goedwig project is designed to support those enterprises based around non-timber forest products. Bringing art and creativity both into the woodlands and the processes of forming groups and sharing ideas can inspire great achievements. It takes time. Learning patience with each other and the slowly growing trees can open up new ways of communicating and achieving long-term goals, benefiting people, nature and places, both now and for generations to come. If you would like to talk to us about your ideas, our contact details can be found on our website, and we look forward to chatting with you.
Let's plant some trees. Let's plant some trees. Nice and big and shady, all covered in leaves. Well, they're good for the air, they're good for the ground. I just want to see trees growing all over town, so let's plant some trees.